Hey guys, welcome to this edition of the LA Sports Hub podcast. I'm joined by staff writers Jamaal, Artis, and Joey Farcone. We also have a guest from NBC Los Angeles, Michael Duarte. Thanks, Mike, for joining the show.
Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
So the hot topic right now has to be the Mlb Trade Deadline. I was today at 1 o'clock, and the Dodgers made a pitching move above everything else to get Yu Darvish from Texas. So, Michael, can you kind of give us your first thoughts on that whole trade and what that means for the Dodgers?
Yeah, so a few pitching moves. Thankfully, luckily, however you want to look at it. And before I get into that, I want to apologize to all your YouTube viewers out there. I've literally been going on no sleep around the clock since that dramatic walk-off finish last night by Kyle Farmer. So, So you want to start? Do you want to know like what happened behind the scenes?
Sure, give us what you know.
Sure. So, I had sources going into this afternoon. I had one in Baltimore, which was helping me out on anything that could come through Zach Britton on that side. I had a source here inside the Dodgers front office behind the scenes. Got to look at least what their war room looked like and their big board looked like, and then I had a source who was a contact within the Rangers organization on Yu Darvish today. So it wasn't a direct path. There was a go-between to then go to the front office and see if they could get information. So it was a little delayed. But my understanding throughout the day, obviously, as I've been kind of reporting throughout the past few weeks, there's been a lot of name mentions, a lot of rumors, and a lot of due diligence on all parts of teams during the trade deadline. The Dodgers, especially their front office, Andrew Friedman, Farhan Zaidi, had been making calls for everybody for weeks, including Yu Darvish. And as I had reported, the Rangers originally wanted a haul for Darvish, and that was going to revolve around either Dodgers prospects, number one pitching prospect Walker Buehler, or center field position player prospect Alex Verdugo. And that's where those conversations had been started for weeks, one of those two. And it was the same with Britton. It was the same with Brad Hand. It was the same with other names I'd mentioned, like Felipe Rivero. But the Dodgers going into the last 24 hours were focusing primarily on Zach Britton. So, and honestly, Britton needed to be the first domino to fall either as a yes or a no for them to do anything else. I was told, I would say about 2 to 3 hours before the deadline, that the Orioles had finally decided to come down off those offers of either Walker Buehler or Verdugo in a return for Britton. And that could either mean Yadier Alvarez was going to go to Baltimore or Willie Calhoun was going to go. And the Dodgers had been skeptical to give up one of those top prospects for a guy like Zach Britton on the Orioles, who has had 2 stints on the DL. He's had some forearm tightness in his left arm, which is an indicator sometimes to Tommy John surgery. And he struggled a little bit in his return. He just got a back-to-back save just the other day. So that was the first time for scouts to see, can this guy go back-to-back, especially when you're playing the playoffs or something like that. So that was the concern for the Dodgers. Do we want to give up one of our top pieces for a guy who could end up getting hurt? We don't know what's there. And finally, with about a couple hours to go, the Orioles lowered that ask. But then when the call was placed to Baltimore Orioles owner Peter Angelos, he wanted a haul in return from my sources equivalent to what the Yankees got for Aroldis Chapman last year, which is at least one of the top 2 prospects, and then 2 to 3 more prospects. And once the owner put the kibosh on it, that kind of changed things up for the Dodgers, and they started to have to go to plans B and C. Plan B at that point was Brad Hand from the Padres. For the past couple of weeks, Padres general manager A.J. Preller had been saying that it was going to be, again, Verdugo. So at the beginning, it was Verdugo and Buehler for Brad Hand. It was so astronomical, it was ridiculous. My understanding is with a few hours to go, he dropped that to one of the two. And then when that final call was placed, I would say about within the hour before the deadline, it was one of those 2 pieces. And the Dodgers weren't willing to part with Verdugo or Buehler for Brad Hand, so they had to move on to that. That's where Tony Watson came up as a potential backup plan. Watson with the Pittsburgh Pirates was an all-star in 2014. He's come down off of those levels recently. He had given some chances as a closer this year, but he lost that role to Felipe Rivero. But he had been coveted by the Dodgers last offseason, so it wasn't going to cost them any of those top picks. So and he's a rental. He's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. So they went ahead and made that move once they knew Britain wasn't going to happen. Now that was the key piece, because with about less than 30 minutes to go, you go get Watson, who's, plan C, I guess you could say, going into the day.
Right.
Now you can turn your attention back to Yu Darvish, because you did not get Britton or Hand, and you know what prospects you now have to go back to them. And they had been working deals, and I had been told that the Rangers were willing to potentially accept Calhoun. Now, the big thing that changed the value on Darvish with the Rangers was Sonny Gray going to the Yankees for significantly less than people thought. It didn't cost the Yankees a top 3 prospect, and it cost them 3 total prospects, I would say, and they're like top 30 in the system. But because it didn't take a top 3 for a really good guy like Sonny Gray, who's under control for next year as well, that lowered the price on Darvish. So I would say, what I was told was that with less than 15 minutes left to go in the trade deadline, that was when the deals for Darvish started to be worked out. And once the Rangers were able to come down and accept Calhoun as the main piece, it was just those final 15 minutes working out the last 2 picks that were involved in there. Davis was the other one. So that trade literally came down to the wire. It was the last trade placed on MLB's desk in New York. And I was told from my source, who had a go-between in the office, that it wasn't going to get done in time, and he wasn't going to get dealt, and it was dead. And then all of a sudden, we all kind of got the text at the last time that it got through. And so then it was just confirming that it was the Dodgers and then the pieces in place, and that's how everything went down.
So, Michael, Jamaal here. So the Rangers, why do you think they were willing to part with Darvish? Is it because he's going to be a free agent at the end of the year? I mean, especially when they were asking for so much. I know that I guess the Gray price kind of changed things, but couldn't they have just decided to keep him too if they weren't going to get one of those top prospects like they did when they traded for Hamels?
Yeah, you could argue that. Now, the Rangers, there's been some like I said, these conversations between the Dodgers and the Rangers for Yu Darvish have been going on now for weeks. The Dodgers have had scouts on Yu Darvish for over a month. So that tells me, and that tells your listeners and viewers out there, the Dodgers knew this guy was going to be one of those guys potentially available early on, and that had them on their radar. They had scouts following him for the past month. I know he's actually struggled in those last 5 starts since scouts have been there. He's been 0-5 with like a 6 ERA. But, yeah, because he's a rental, and if the Rangers were going to be sellers, then he was the guy to go. The Rangers were the ones who leaked out about 2 weeks ago that Darvish was available and they would listen to calls on him. Now, your question, why were they willing to part with him? Well, right now they're 4 games below 500. They're 18 games out of the division. The Astros are running away with the division. Now, the Rangers are in this weird mode, like you said. They have Cole Hamels. They have a lot of good players. They actually traded for a lot of guys last year to make a run, so they didn't want to really break up that core. But kind of like, with the Los Angeles Clippers, for example, with Chris Paul, if you're going to lose a guy, you don't want to get nothing back for him. And there's no guarantee necessarily that Yu Darvish is going to re-sign with that team long term. I was told that's a 50-50 shot at best that Darvish re-signs with the Rangers. So once the Rangers, even though the players still find themselves a handful of games out of the wild card, and they wanted to make a push for it, and the players on the Rangers were telling the front office, no, let's go for it. Let's not pull back. Let's not trade. Let's not sell. Let's go for the wild card at least. The front office had a different idea. They wanted to get rid of pieces that they deemed to be rentals that were probably going to be gone anyways. Guy like Luke Roy, who they acquired last year, like Jeffress, who they acquired last year. Those were pieces that were built on for a championship run, a playoff run. They went back. So Darvish was the main guy. The Rangers are still going to go after Darvish in free agency, I've been told. But as the trade deadline started to wind down today, I was told by my sources that there was probably a better than 90% chance Darvish got dealt, and that it was either going to be Dodgers or Astros. And then in the final 30 minutes, it was Dodgers or nobody.
Yeah, hey, Michael. Joey here. I definitely think the Rangers made the right move. If they would have held on to him and he left in free agency, they would have got a compensation pick. With the trade they made today, they had added some good depth. Willie Calhoun, the guy that I think never really fit with the Dodgers system. When he goes to the American League now, where he could play the DH position, he was never really going to fit in at second base with the Dodgers. The scouts, they said that he didn't have a lot of range. He didn't turn the double play very well. So I think that the Rangers definitely made a good decision adding, a number 4 prospect in the Dodgers system, and then our number 17 and 27, I believe. So, what are your thoughts on Willie Calhoun and how he'll fit in the American League?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up, first and foremost, that compensation pick that had the Rangers held on to him and lost him in free agency this winter, what they would have gotten back, because that pick would have been in like the 75 to 80 range. Yeah. And Calhoun, as the number 4 Dodgers prospect, is much better than a pick you're going to get in that 75 to 80 range in the compensation draft, in the compensatory draft. So that really wasn't a big factor in hanging on to them, because you probably could get more for him now. And as I mentioned, they obviously wanted Buehler or Verdugo first. Those were the guys they had been heavily scouting and they wanted. And once the price on everybody kind of started to come down, they adjusted. So they do end up, as you mentioned, with a top 4 prospect for the Dodgers. Essentially, that's what it's going to cost this team for 6 weeks of Darvish and potentially 4 to 5 postseason starts if they're able to advance to the World Series. That's what the Dodgers felt comfortable with giving back. Now, for those people who don't know Willie Calhoun, I'm actually good friends with Calhoun, not like great friends like buddy, but meet with him and talk to him every spring training in the off season. Text him from time to time. He's an amazing guy, loves video games, really hardworking player. I really wanted to see him succeed, and as I tweeted earlier today to him, I hope he ends up back in Dodger blue at some point in his career. I really like to see that. But as you mentioned, he is kind of the odd man out. And going into this, I was asked what if I was a general manager for the Dodgers, what my big board would look like. And the number 1 prospect of those 4 or 5 that I was willing to part with, at the top of the list was Calhoun, followed by Alvarez, followed then by Verdugo, and then Buehler as those 2 as the untouchables at the bottom of it. So I'm happy in the sense that Calhoun, the one piece I think the Dodgers could part with, was the one who went back. He's very good with the long ball. He hits for power. But as you mentioned, the scouts say that defensively, that is where there's a lot of question marks, specifically where he's going to play in the field defensively. Right now with the Dodgers organization, he's playing second base. But as you touched upon, he has difficulty turning the double play. So scouts believe that it's possible the Rangers won't use him at second base. They may try him out in the outfield, and that's where he could go. But, I mean, he's a good guy. He's got 23 home runs right now. He's a guy who's going to slug 25 to 30 home runs if he's an everyday starter in the American League with the Rangers. So he does have that type of talent. He's batting right now about 300. I mean, this is a really good prospect that the Rangers got back. But it is, like you said, the defensive questions. And now that the Dodgers have traded for Logan Forsythe, they have Chris Taylor, a guy who can right now play almost anywhere, and you don't really know where you're going to play him. They still have Utley under control, and the question is Utley's on a 1-year deal. The Dodgers would love to bring him back literally on a 1-year deal every year if he's down for it, because he's such a great clubhouse guy and a mentor to guys like Corey Seager and Chris Taylor. There was really just no room for Willie Calhoun right now. And depending on what this team does in the offseason, I think you're going to see Verdugo get called up in September, as well as Walker Buehler. So they're going to get a chance, Dodger fans, to look at those 2 prospects up close and personal here in about a month. And then I think because Verdugo was untouchable and you held on to him, I think he's probably your starting left fielder potentially next year, depending on how they handle the outfield situation, with Cody Bellinger probably going to first base, depending on what Adrian Gonzalez decides to do.
And what would you say? Yu Darvish means for their actual playoff? Is that like a make or break kind of situation for them, or does he actually make that much of a difference when they make it to the postseason?
Well, as I said before and earlier, if you're going to trade for Darvish, you don't necessarily need Darvish for the stretch run. It's not like the past few seasons where you're competing in the NL West division with the San Francisco Giants and you need to win the division or hang on or catch up. You're 14 games ahead in the division. I think 12 games ahead of the Nationals for the best record in the National League. As long as the Dodgers can play 500 ball the rest of the way, at least, and they're playing almost 80% right now in the month of July, 70%, 700 ball over the season. It's just insane, those numbers. But if they can just hang on and play about 500 ball the rest of the way, they're going to lock up the best record in the National League, which is home field advantage in the National League in the playoffs. They're going to lock up their 5th straight NL West division title. You don't necessarily need Darvish now in the next 6 to 8 weeks. You need Darvish in the playoffs. And while it wasn't the number one reason that the front office decided to trade for him now, it was a big reason, and that is that Kershaw for the past 3 postseasons has been pitching on 3 days rest. In an NLCS matchup, you're talking about throwing him in games 1, 4, and 7 if you can stack up that lineup. You need a guy like they used to have with Zach Greinke who can slot in behind Kershaw. And the biggest thing about this trade is not necessarily that you have a 1-2 piece now with Darvish. It is the fact that the guys like Rich Hill, who was your number 2 starter in the postseason last season, get slotted down to a number 3 or 4 starter. And a guy like Alex Wood, who was an all-star this season, who's playing at an elite level, also slots into that 3 or 4 role. The biggest thing about that NLCS last season with the Dodgers and why they lost to the Cubs, one, the Cubs had the ability to line up their rotation 1, 2, 3, 4 heading into that series by beating the Giants in 4, whereas the Dodgers, who had to go 5 games with the Nationals, didn't have the luxury of starting Clayton Kershaw game 1 and going head-to-head with that team. So then you had to pitch Kenta Maeda twice. You had to pitch Julio Urias, a 19, 20-year-old kid who had never pitched in the postseason, never pitched in a game of that magnitude, and he only lasted 4 innings in that game 4. That was a big game that the Dodgers needed to win to have a chance to close out the Cubs in that series. You now, Maeda and obviously Urias is hurt, but Maeda is probably not even going to be on the postseason roster or starting in any postseason games. That much we know. So now with the addition of Darvish, you can move Rich Hill, who was your number 2, to 3 or 4, and you can have Alex Wood in 3 or 4. And now you match up really nicely in those later games that you need to take a game or 2 with the Nationals and with the Cubs.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. I definitely think that's the number one reason why they added Darvish today. Another thing it adds is another starting pitcher that can go deeper into games. I think Darvish is the only other pitcher on our roster now that is averaging more than 6 innings pitched per game. That's something that's going to be important once you get into the postseason to kind of create that bridge to get to Morrow, Baez, and Jansen in the later innings. That's going to allow us to put Ryu into the bullpen, which gives us another left-handed arm coming out of the pen. So I definitely think giving Kershaw the rest. I think Farcone said that. Zaidi, I forget how to say his name. He said that. And to the media today, that was the number one reason. And but I think that those other reasons are going to be important for the Dodgers going into the postseason.
Yeah, Zaidi talked about specifically the regular season. He mentioned that when we spoke to him on a conference call, he mentioned that Darvish's acquisition had nothing to do with Clayton Kershaw's back injury. And I agree with that in the sense that Kershaw's running, he's playing catch, he's doing some baseball activities again. It's a strain. It's not a herniated disc like last year. It's not as severe as an injury. But they are – and let's face it, they're 7-0 since he got hurt in the DL. So it's not like this huge need, like panic, let's do this. And the Dodgers don't make moves out of desperation. But acquiring Darvish does allow him to continue to rest and rehab. I think that 4 to 6 week timetable is still accurate. That allows Darvish to slot in there. As of right now, Brock Stewart is your 5th starter. So instead of Ryu going to the bullpen, look for in the immediate future, the next month, Brock Stewart to go back to the bullpen, or maybe he even has to go down because of some of these other left-handed arms they acquired. But your starting rotation now is Darvish, Wood, Hill, Maeda, and Ryu until Kershaw comes back. Then once Kershaw comes back, you're looking at September and the rosters expand, and you're going to see Buehler and some other guys. Ryu probably goes to the pen. Maybe Maeda goes to the pen. And it gives you some options. But as far as going deep into the games, yes, Darvish does that. I think he only has 2 quality starts, though, in his last, 6 or 7. He has struggled, as I mentioned, in his last 5 starts. But the Dodgers, you have to understand, they don't necessarily allow their pitchers to go deep into the games that much unless it's Kershaw. It's a nice luxury if you do that, but they're looking long-term. They don't want to get these guys' innings limits up, and that is something that Zaidi specifically mentioned in our conference call today, that a lot of these guys like Brandon McCarthy, Hyun-Jin Ryu, they're reaching their innings limits more so than they've had in any previous year. So to give those guys more rest down the stretch is something that Darvish is going to be able to let them do.
So then, Michael, did they do enough to stretch the games out, in case even in the playoffs, if Darvish can only go 5 innings, do they have somebody who can come in the 6th inning and stretch it to the point where they get to Baez?
Yeah, the question mark for me, and it's something we can discuss, is Tony Watson. I'm not entirely 100% thrilled on that move. It didn't cost you really a lot, so I'm fine with it, and he's a rental, and I think the reward outweighs the risk for Tony Watson. But my sentiment is here's a guy who's allowing, I think, left-handers and right-handers in his splits, batters against him are batting over 300 this year.
Yeah.
So if you needed a guy that was lights out against a left-hander, he hasn't proven that in Pittsburgh this season. Luis Avalon is holding batters under 200 batting average this year, so he's better than that. Dayton has had some injury problems this year, but when he's healthy, he's usually better than that. So my question is was Tony Watson a significant upgrade over Luis Avalon and Grant Dayton, your left-handers in the bullpen? And I don't necessarily believe so, but I think the Dodgers are hoping that take him to a pitcher-friendly park like Dodger Stadium, like Chavez Ravine, get him under a pitching coach like Rick Honeycutt who can revitalize careers. Just look at Brandon Morrow, for example, and hoping that he can get closer to that all-star form he had in 2014, these final few months of the season, and heading into the postseason. But to answer your question, and this is why I was actually hoping they could acquire a guy like Justin Wilson, like Zach Britton, or Brad Hand, so they would have that 1-2 punch. So even if you didn't get a Yu Darvish, if it was Brandon McCarthy, Kenta Maeda, or Hyun-Jin Ryu or somebody in a 4th game in the playoffs, they only need to go 5 because you could have a bullpen that's going to shut down the 8th and 9th, and then you only really need a guy like Pedro Baez, for example, or Brandon Morrow to give you an inning in the postseason. But right now that bullpen lines up with Kenley Jansen, Tony Watson, Brandon Morrow, Pedro Baez. Those are the 4 back-end guys that we know. Those guys are all really good. If Watson can come back to his form in 2014, those 4 guys are lights out, and they give you 4 innings. So if you do need Darvish or Alex Wood or Rich Hill to only give you 5, those are your 4 in the back end right now in the playoffs. And then you're going to see this combination of Ross Stripling, Tony Segurani, who else could be there? Luis Avalon could be there. These are a guy like Brock Stewart or Ryu. These are the guys that you're going to wonder who makes up those final 3 postseason bullpen slots. Those are the guys that they'll be debating. But I think those 4 I just named, Kenley, Morrow, P.D. Baez, and Tony Watson, those are your back-end 4. Those are a lock right now for the postseason roster.
Do you think they have any more moves left, like on the waiver wire maybe? Maybe acquire a bat?
They might. It depends on what happens and where they need to look and upgrade. The Dodgers are always looking to upgrade, and it's a lot easier, honestly, to do it during the waiver trade deadline, which is August 31st, because while the Dodgers, with the best record in baseball, aren't going to be high up on that waiver order. So, for example, had they not got Yu Darvish and they wanted to get him after this deadline, before August 31st, that would have been a lot harder because there's other teams that could have placed a waiver claim for Darvish ahead of them. But as I had reported, if Justin Verlander or Johnny Cueto from the Giants were 2 guys who were going to go on waivers after this deadline and the Dodgers didn't get Darvish, then because of those salaries and what they are, the Dodgers are one of the only teams who could afford and absorb that salary, and they could have put in a claim for those guys. And if a deal had worked out, those guys could have come here in August if the Dodgers didn't get Darvish. Getting Darvish now, and knowing the way the front office works as far as financially, they're lowering the salary cap and the salary on this team. I don't think you'll see a move barring an injury, a major injury, by the way, like Kershaw or Darvish. I don't see them making a move like that for a front-end starter. But you're right. Depending on what happens, if someone else get hurt, there could be one or two small moves that take place. Obviously, Carlos Ruiz, a guy last year, people were shocked to see A.J. Ellis leave and Carlos Ruiz come in. But what Ruiz did was give you a right-handed pitcher who did very well against left-handed pitching as a bench guy, as a guy that essentially was the same role as Ellis as far as his playing time was concerned. But he could hit much better than Ellis against left-handed pitching. They were trying to fill a weakness. Right now, this team doesn't really have a weakness that I can see, especially if Tony Watson is able to perform at a high level. Now, if he's not and he struggles, then you might see them still try to go out and get a left-handed bullpen arm at the waiver deadline.
What was it like last night with the Farmer situation and seeing how other young guys like Bellinger and Seager have kind of made LA their own really and earned their playing time? For a guy like Farmer to come in and deliver in a walk-off hit, and you being there, what was that experience like for you?
Being there in person, being there in person, I've been there for every single home game this season. I've seen all 9 walk-off victories this year. Rash Markazi from ESPN, who I ran into a couple days earlier at Pac-12 Media Day this week, said to me, does it literally feel like the Dodgers are going to come back and win no matter what? They're going to walk off at home no matter what. And I said, honestly, kinda. Like, it's gotten to the point now where I'm not afraid to jinx it by writing my game story or recap that the Dodgers come back and win anymore. I used to always don't even want to touch it, even if they have a lead, because you don't want to jinx it. It's to the point now where I'm comfortable writing it because I'm so confident in this team. I will say specifically last night with Kyle Farmer, when he came up to bat, I knew that Dave Roberts' hands were tied because you had removed Cody Bellinger after his at-bat with the bases loaded in the bottom of the 9th when he popped up, because you were going to do a double switch. Chase Utley goes into first base, and that batting spot was the last one in the lineup, so that gave you 8 more turns until the pitching spot came up. It's unfortunate to take Cody Bellinger's bat out of a game when it's extra innings, but you needed to do that move unless you wanted the pitcher spot to come up much faster. So sure enough, as fate would have it, that pitcher spot comes up in a crucial situation, and the only position player you have on the bench is Kyle Farmer. So Dave Roberts' hands were tied. This is the time where this kid's going to have to make his major league debut. And I'm sitting here thinking, it's making your major league debut is nerve-wracking as it is, facing big league pitching for the whole time, your family in attendance, 53,000 people in attendance in the sellout national ESPN game, all of that already stuff to take in. And now you have to do it with the game on the line, runners on first and second and 1 out, and knowing if you hit into a double play, you're the scapegoat in that situation. So I honestly was just hoping he did not ground into a double play. And he was even saying, too, going through his mind, he was just looking to not strike out, not ground into a double play as well. And like he said in his post-game interview and said to me, his father's voice, who's his pitching coach in the offseason, who throws him BP, who has been there from day one, always told him, turn over those hands quickly. If you get an outside pitch, go oppo with it. And that's exactly what he did to win the game. So, fans, there's a reason why fans are stunned by that, because it's never happened in Dodgers franchise history. Nobody's ever had a walk-off hit to win a game in their very first career MLB at bat. In the Dodgers franchise history. So you all witnessed history yesterday, and it couldn't have happened to a nicer person. I've been talking to him all week since he's been here. I've talked to him in spring training. He's a really nice, humble a Georgia boy from the South, Southern Peach. So he was really happy. And the fact that him and Alex Wood are best friends and college roommates, and they got to share it together and tackle each other. And literally after the game, Alex Wood was showing me and other members of the media and Kyle's family all his cell phone videos that he had of everything in the moment that he was recording. So it was pretty fun and special to see that.
And would you go as far as to say that this season is where they actually win the World Series again?
I've always said I'm going to stick to it. The postseason is a crapshoot. It really, really is. Unlike the NBA,
Right.
which, there's 5 guys on the court at a time on any team. So a guy like LeBron James or a dominant offensive player can literally dictate a game. So people were comparing, I heard the Cavaliers and Warriors to the Dodgers and Astros, that it's a foregone conclusion that it's going to meet. Absolutely not, in my opinion. Major League Baseball is such a crapshoot. It's literally pitcher to pitcher. And I want to preface and caution Dodgers fans out there that this offense we're seeing and the runs that they're scoring and the run differential that leads Major League Baseball is on a historic pace, and all these comebacks, those are going to be few and far between in the postseason. You're going to go up against guys like Scherzer, Strasburg, Lester, Quintana, Jake Arrieta, tons of former Cy Young winners, Zach Greinke probably again, Robbie Ray, an all-star. These are guys you're going to face in the postseason. These are going to be one-run games, and in the postseason in baseball, it literally can hinge on one play, one at-bat, one mistake. And that's why it is a crapshoot. You never know what's going to happen. But I will say that this season and at Dodger Stadium and with this team, it just feels different. It feels kind of like a team of destiny. But like I said, I'll caution that can all change in the postseason when it's all about starting pitching and relief pitching.
If they did make it to the World Series, though, is there a team that you'd want them to end up facing?
Well, after what the Yankees did today, acquiring Sonny Gray, and they're still a half a game ahead in the AL East, I think anybody who's a Dodger fan and knows the history of this club and this organization and franchise dating back to the Brooklyn Dodger days, and I think MLB will have no problem with this as well for TV ratings, but you want to see the New York Yankees and the Dodgers in the World Series. I think a close second would be the Boston Red Sox because of the Boston-LA rivalry. The Astros would be fun, in my opinion, as would maybe seeing the Indians again because they made it last year. Those are names that are throwing out, but for me, it would be Yankees, Red Sox 1-2, hands down.
Anything else?
I just want to go back real quick, going back to tempering our expectations. This team, 39-6 since July 7th, I believe, or June 7th, I'm sorry. Kind of reminds you of that 2013 team. Obviously we're on a higher pace than that team, but we all remember how we felt going to the postseason. We had Juan Uribe in the NLDS, and then you get to game 1 of the NLCS, and boom, Hanley Ramirez goes down with that broken rib, and that's all she wrote. So I'm only 22 years old, so I can't speak for the 70s when we faced the Yankees in 77 and 81. But I just definitely want to keep our expectations tempered going into the postseason.
Yeah, I think when this Darvish trade came down, I got a lot of it's over, World Series, lock it up, all those things in my timeline. And like you said, absolutely you need to temper those expectations. And for those fans out there who are not old enough and who are watching this or listening to this, who didn't see those 76 and 77 World Series against the Yankees, the Welch versus Reggie Jackson matchups in the late innings where one year Jackson hits the home run and does the Dodgers in, another year he strikes out. I wasn't alive for that personally, but my father was in the nosebleed seats watching those games, watching the strikeouts. Those are fun matchups that go back to years, even the days of Mantle and Ruth and Duke Snyder and all those guys. This is history on the line. It would be so much fun to have all of that. And just imagine the television ratings and what they're going to come up with, all the flashbacks, all the old black and white vintage grainy footage of those past World Series with the Dodgers and the Yankees, the team who kind of like the Lakers and Celtics have the most championships in baseball against the Dodgers who are up there with a lot of championships of their own and who need to kind of start adding to that while they have this such a good team and this a dynasty team as far as playoffs are concerned recently. You definitely would love to see those two teams line up and match up. But like you said, and you hit the nail on the head, 2013, there was 2 moments in that NLCS against the Cardinals that I look back at. First of all, for those fans that remember, Carlos Beltran calling off John Jay in center field in extra innings to throw out Andre Ethier at the plate. That was a Zach Greinke start. If Andre Ethier is a half a second faster or Beltran doesn't call off Jay, the Dodgers win that game. They win the next game. Or Kershaw actually lost the next game, but then they came back and won. That series totally goes different. And like you said, Hanley Ramirez takes a fastball to the ribs. That entire series goes differently. Last year, the Dodgers were up on the Cubs 2-1. A lot of media members and journalists were calling the series over. But obviously, Kenta Maeda and Julio Rivas couldn't get it down. The Dodgers just didn't have that starting pitching depth to match up with Hendricks and John Lackey, and that was the turning point in that series. So it comes down to those singular moments. I mean, Jock Peterson hits a home run off Max Scherzer last year in that Game 5 of the NLDS. You have to have Kenley Jansen throw 3 innings of relief and Kershaw come out of the pen for the save. If they don't go that route, if they go the traditional route and go to like Pedro Baez or something, maybe we don't even see them play the Cubs in the NLCS. So it literally can come down to 1 or 2 plays in the postseason. That's it.
Anything you want to add, Jamaal?
I'm old enough to remember some of those moments, and I still remember '88. Really, I really hope that I get to see them play in the World Series this year. I don't know if I can handle, especially when they're this strong, and the way they beat teams, either coming back or they've done a good job of holding on to leads, which was different in these past years when they didn't have much of a bullpen. And the fact that they can rely on other starters besides Kershaw now in the playoffs, it makes me optimistic. But yeah, I'm like Michael. I'm very tempered. I've seen too many 8th inning, 7th inning home runs. Like against the Phillies in 2008 and 2009, and
that's another one you brought up. The Jonathan Broxton groove pitch to Matt Stairs. Yeah, and that completely could have changed that series. And then the next year he does it again to Jimmy Rollins. So, Dodgers fans have had a lot of heartbreak in the postseason. Like I said, it's a crapshoot. It's luck. It comes down to a single play. But it does feel different. I will give you that. I just hope it can carry on. And you know what? The Cubs were the team of destiny last year. The Royals were the team of destiny the year before. The Giants were the team of destiny the year before that. It feels like the baseball gods do smile upon certain teams. And if they are, then it's definitely the Dodgers they're smiling upon this year. That's much for sure.
Anything else you would want to say just to fans outside of tempered expectations, anything that they should look forward to this season that maybe they didn't get to see last year?
Yeah,
Sorry, I was going to just one question, Michael. I was curious in regards to reports about trades and stuff. So do you think you'll ever make up with Pittsburgh Pirate fans?
I kind of made up with the more classy, educated Pittsburgh Pirate fans, I'll tell you that. But the ones that are tweeting me right now as we speak, so much for that Rivero trade, and I guess your sources were wrong, Duarte. For those guys coming out there, look, I don't think I'll make up with some of those ones, the nasty, the mean ones. But hopefully when I go to Pittsburgh for when the Dodgers go there towards the end of next month, I'll be able to, by then, hopefully the Pirates will be eliminated from the postseason. The Dodgers will have clinched, and I'll be able to stick it to them real nice right there on the field while they won't be allowed on the field. That would be nice. I definitely want to do that. But I have made a truce with most of the smart, educated Pittsburgh fans, yes.
Take a food tester with you if you go to Permani's, just in case.
Yeah, I will. I'm not going to trust anything. I'm not going to let anybody know what hotel I'm staying at. It's got to be real low key until I get on the field, and I have some birds that I want to show them. But one thing I wanted to mention and bring up to fans, because I get this a lot. Everybody wants this to be the year. Everybody wanted the Dodgers to go for it this year, and you never know with this front office. They're always thinking long term. They're visionary. They're creative. They always do some amazing things. Andrew Friedman and that front office, the brain trust, as they call it, that always have surprised me. Just look at how they acquired Alex Wood at the trade deadline 2 years ago. They're always making these amazing moves involving 3 teams. They traded for Todd Frazier also in the winter offseason 2 years ago, and then flipped him right away for 3 prospects. Those 3 prospects turned into, or 2 of those prospects turned into Reddick and Rich Hill last year. So they're always doing things. And if the front office really wanted to go for it this year and sell off those prospects, that's why a guy like Rivero was in the mix. That's why you could get a Britton. That's why you could get a Darvish or a Gray. Really, with the Dodgers prospect, their farm system is so deep. They've bolstered it up over these past few years with this front office that they could have literally gotten almost anybody. I'm not even joking about that. Come at me, fans, if you want to. Those prospects, Buehler, Verdugo, those guys are so good, Calhoun, Alvarez, that they could have gotten almost anybody in the league had they been willing to part with them. But as you saw today, they have this balance where they're balancing the immediate future with the long-term future of this team. And they did a great job today of setting them up for the immediate future, and we still have long-term future for this team. And that brings me to the question that I've been asking fans who really want them to go out World Series or bust. I love what the Cubs did, the moves that they made at the trade deadline, but they've dealt off a lot of that farm system here now the past 2 seasons. They're really going for it in this short window. And I look at recent examples. You look at a team like the Miami Marlins, who last won the World Series in 2003. They had that great magical run. They kind of sold off. They went for broke. They got it, but they haven't been back in the postseason since. No pennants or titles since. Do you want to be that team that gets 1 World Series in 15 years, but then doesn't ever get back even to the postseason? Or do you want to be, and I bring this up because Stan Kasten was the architect of those teams, do you want to be the 90s, early 2000 Atlanta Braves that won 15 division titles out of 16 seasons, but also only won 1 World Series? Personally, and this is completely up to fans, but personally, I'd rather be the Braves and have long sustaining dominance of winning this NL West, of beating the Giants, of making the postseason every year and making runs at the World Series, even if you only end up winning 1 in the next decade.
Yeah, I agree. It's all about putting yourself in a position to win. You got to give yourself a chance. The more opportunities you get, the more opportunities you'll have to succeed. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Michael, for taking the time to join us. We'd love to have you on as the season kind of progresses and we kind of figure out, especially how the Darvish thing actually will play out on the mound. But we look forward to having you in the future.
I appreciate that. Yeah, you're welcome, guys. Thank you. Anytime, like I said, I'm glad we made this happen. Let's make it happen again. And we'll look for Darvish to get back on track. I think that's the immediate concern with the Dodgers as far as just letting him get back to kind of his normal form, not the one we've seen in Texas over the past 5 starts. But it's going to all be about the postseason and those 3 or 4 starts he can make, and hopefully he makes them and we go all the way.
Thanks again.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.